Hello and welcome to Quilt Addicts Anonymous. I'm Stephanie Soebbing. Today is a Stashin with Stephanie day where we take a new fat quarter friendly pattern and a brand new line of fabric and we make something beautiful with it. This month, just a little bit about Stashin with Stephanie before we go forward. It is a subscription program that we run here at Quilt Addicts Anonymous. You sign up and it's $29.99 a month plus shipping, and for that you get 12 fat quarters for the price of 10. And a $10 off a $20 purchase coupon code that you can use to get more fabric, background, binding, backing, whatever you need to complete that month's quilt. And we give you a free pattern, a new one each month that's been developed specifically to work with that fabric line, but a lot of times it can work with others as well. And you get access to all of our Stashin with Stephanie patterns that we've ever done. I think we're up to 14 or 15 now, so it's a huge value. Right when you sign up, you get that, and then about a month later, you get your first bundle of fabric. We always ship on the 15th of the month, and you bill the previous month. So if you sign up today, your first bundle will come around the 15th of the next month. So let's take a peek at this month's fabric. We are doing Pat Bravo's Nuncia, and I just love Pat Bravo. She has really rich colors and they all really work very well together, and I just really love what she does here. And this actually coordinates very well with Legendary, which was the last Pat Bravo line that we featured with Stashin with Stephanie. So we still have quite a bit of that in the shop. And if you wanted to mix and match and make this quilt bigger and even scrappier, you could definitely do that by getting a fat quarter bundle of Legendary to go with Nuncia, which we have here. And I just love how it goes from those really light ones to these really bold dark prints as well, and then it kind of has like a creamy background to it, so it is just really pretty, really fun. And this is a block that we are making this time. I know it looks challenging, but we're going to break it down and make it easy for you in today's video. So let's get started. So the first thing I'm going to show you how to do is how to cut your diamonds and your triangles out using a clear view triangle ruler. It doesn't matter so much that you have the clear view, although that's what I use all the time, but that you have points on all three sides. So you can see there's one here, here, and here. A lot of the triangle rulers will have a blunt tip up here, and the math is very different for ones that have that top tip cut off versus ones that have all 3 points. You will not get things to fit together correctly if you use one that has that top cut off, so make sure you get one that has that top point. Again, I really like the clear view. We'll link it down below, and by the way, you can sign up for Stashin with Stephanie and get today's pattern. All those links and also to Nuncia fabric and a kit for this is all in the video description down below. So first we're going to cut our triangle. So starting as far over as I can, I'm going to line up an inch line with the bottom of the fabric, and then I've got the tip of my triangle up with the top there, and then I'm just going to give that a little slice. And if you need to flip this around to make it more ergonomic for you, feel free to do so. But without moving the ruler, I'm going to go ahead and then slice up the side here as well. So we've got our first triangle. It's important that your tip be very pointy. If it is a little flat at the top, then your triangle is going to be a little wider than it's supposed to be, and then you're going to have trouble fitting everything and getting it to lay flat. So when you're cutting, make sure that all 3 of your points are very pointy, and that will work. All right, so we've got our first one. So the next one, we're just going to flip everything over with your ruler. So now the inch line is lined up with the top of your fabric, and the side that we just cut is even with the left side of your ruler, just like it would be if you were cutting with a square. And then I've got my tip even with the bottom down there, so I can have a nice pointy tip. And now we're going to cut. So that's it. That's all there is to it. I would just keep flipping my ruler around, going down until I have enough triangles to meet the size that I need for the quilt I'm making here. By the way, I just love that there are tiny little quilt blocks in this background fabric, and so it's going to be super cute when it is all put together. All right, so the diamonds go just a little bit differently, and I'll walk you through that now. We're still going to do the same thing we did before, where we're going to line up an inch line along the bottom, and then we've got our tip right at the top here, and I've got it scooted over just about as much as I can. We don't need this extra bit for this quilt, but you can always save it for scraps and do something fun with it later. Just make sure you leave a 1/4 inch seam allowance on the edge. All right, so here's the difference between the diamond and the triangle. With the triangle, we would have sliced right there. With the diamond, we're just gonna flip the ruler. We'll skip that cutting step. And we're still gonna line everything up with the top. So I've got that inch line even with the top. And this time I'm moving the left edge over so it's even with the top tip that I just cut. And then the bottom of the triangle, this tip here, is also even with the bottom. So now when I slice this, I'm gonna get a perfect diamond. Sometimes people ask me, like, what is the measurement of this side so I can get away with doing it with just my regular 60-degree lines on your ruler. And it is nearly impossible to cut a correct diamond without this. There certainly are ways to do it. I've shown it before where you can sort of pull it up like this and then slice along it, but it's just so much easier to just have the ruler. So if you don't have a clear view, and you like our patterns, we use them about every other month because I like to do one that's nice and easy and you can get done quickly, and then one that's going to challenge you a little more. And so whenever we do ones that are challenging you a little more, I'm often using this ruler to do that because I really like the look of it, but it's not that hard once you break it down. So just bite the bullet, get the ruler, and you will be happy, and it will be much easier to cut and everything will go together perfectly. All right, so once I've got everything nice and lined up, go ahead and give that a slice. So now we've got our diamond, and just to do the rest of them, all we would do is we would just keep moving on down the strip, just sliding it down and lining it up like we just did to cut them. And one other thing, there's just a lot of little hidden elements in this. It's like the background fabric that the tiny little motifs are actually quilt blocks. In this one, there are some leopard faces within the leopard print, and it's just really very thoughtful collection. I really like how this came together, and Pat Bravo always does such a wonderful job, and this one just does not disappoint. So first we're going to make the little tiny piece triangles that go on the outside of that diamond. And to do that, we're just going to sew these guys together and create that triangle. I like to do all this first, so that way I've got them all ready to go and assemble to the diamonds that match, and I can make sure I like all my colors. So, but at this point it just doesn't matter because you're just sewing all of your diamonds to all of your background. So this is a really good chain piecing, and it really doesn't take that long. I was able to get it done probably to the point of doing this video within a day or so. And I think I cut for like an hour the day previous to be all ready to go. And then I spent about a day sewing and got the quilt almost 2/3 of the way done. So it looks more challenging, but it is not once you know the tips and tricks to get it done. So we're gonna have some fun here. So here's another reason why I love that Clearview triangle ruler with all 3 points, is it makes lining these up for piecing very easy. So what you're gonna do is you're just gonna take your right sides together, and we're gonna line it up so that our points are nice and in alignment up top. And then you're gonna have a little bit of a point sticking out down here, and it should be exactly, this little V here should be exactly a 1/4 inch away, so that way when you're sewing, that needle should come straight out through there. All right, so I'm just sewing that 1/4 inch seam. Again, this is a great opportunity to chain piece and really make that go very fast. Just gonna slow down as I get to that end, and that turned out pretty good. We've got that seam is coming out, probably see it better from this side. That seam is coming out right where that little valley is, and that's exactly where we want it to be if we've cut everything correctly and then we've aligned it correctly. This is another reason why it's really good to chain piece, because then you can do all of these at once. I think I kind of split it up into colorways, that way I wasn't doing so many at a time, but it kind of sped it up a little bit. But to press things, I just kind of open that seam up, and then I put the nose of my iron straight down the center of that seam so that I can press these open. And then I'll go at it from the other side as well. Just put my iron down for a second. Pressing your seams open whenever you're doing a 60-degree or 30-degree angle is very critical, because it's going to help that point lay nice and flat, and it also is positioning your little dog ears so that we can use those to line up and make sure that everything is in the correct spot going forward. So for example, we have this piece here. And so now that this is pressed over to the side, our little dog ear here becomes the point that we are going to line it up with, right there. And so now I've got that triangle of the new piece lined up exactly on top of that dog ear, and that gives me a really nice place to get everything lined up in. And then when I sew this, again, we're going to be coming out right in these valleys. We'll start here and we will end right there. All right, so we're going to give this one more press. We're going to go ahead and press that open. And one thing to note is whenever I'm getting to a point where there's lots of seamless like this, I always lift and press. That way I don't accidentally push something in the wrong direction. I'm just getting a nice flat seam, and then we have a nice beautiful point that lays nice and flat. There's not a lot of bulk in there, which you can sometimes get when you're pressing things from one side to another. I also find that things stay truer to size too when you are pressing them nice and open. So here's a really great tip on how to create a scrappy look that isn't overwhelming. We've all had those quilts where it looks like our stash just kind of threw up on the quilt, and this is a good way to rein it in. So what I did is I got all of my diamonds done, and then I laid out all of my large diamonds and I paired them up with every single one that I had left of these. So basically with every single yellow, it had this combination with it. And by laying that all out on the table, I was able to know ahead of time that I was gonna like the combination of all of the diamonds with my little piece triangles. And that gives you a chance to kind of swap it out and mix and match before you're fully committed to it, because we've all been there. We're like, we've got one fabric left and we're like, I hate these fabrics that are going with it, and I wish I would have figured this out earlier. So a little bit of pre-planning where you just lay everything out ahead of time and decide what's going to go with where. And then in this case, I've got multiples that all look like this that are distributed throughout the quilt. It kind of tones it down a little bit. You still get that nice scrappy look, but you are able to have it a little bit more planned and cohesive when it all goes together, which kind of helps the eye move around the quilt a little better. All right, well, let's get started sewing this. It basically is the same thing we just did, just the pieces are bigger. So we're going to go ahead and sew this piece triangle to our diamond, and then we'll do the same on the other side. It's the same process of sewing the little triangles to the little diamond, just this time there's some extra seams in there. Just like before, when I flip these guys right sides together, I'm going to make sure that I get those top triangles nice and lined up, so that way I can sew straight down and everything will line up just as it should when it's all together. All right, I don't typically pin this, but you certainly can if you want to. What I do is I kind of just line up my edges and I kind of hold them in place with my hands. And down here, I've just got it so that my edges are lined up, and I've just got a fingertip on top of that little point there. I'm gonna hold everything where it should be. Then when I get close to the edge, I change my finger to the other side to kind of hold it together. Again, this is a really great opportunity for chain piecing, because then you can do one entire colorway at a time. So you can do all your sewing and then all your pressing and then your sewing again at once, and it sort of helps speed up the process, makes you a more efficient quilter. Again, just press those seams open and from both sides. And so now what we're going to do is we're going to flip this right sides together, and again we're going to line the tip of this triangle up with the tip of our dog ear, and down at the bottom over here it should be hanging out just a smidge. Now here's a great way to make sure you're on track if you're new to doing triangles. So what you can do is you can take a disappearing pin. A pencil will work too, because it'll be on the wrong side of your fabric, but what you can do is you can just take your, in this case, my friction gel pen, and I'm lining up a 1/4 inch mark with the edges there, and that's the edge that's going to be pinned to it, and I'm just making a little mark at the corners here, and this helps me determine where everything should be lined up so that that seam hits where it should be. So what you can do here is just line up your edges, and then this little mark should hit right at the seam allowance where the back is, right there. So you could put a pin in here, and then also on the other side to sort of keep that together, or you can just use it as a visual guide to make sure you've got everything lined up the way you should. And then eventually, once you've done enough of these, you won't need that anymore. You'll just be able to know where it is, like I do at this point, because I've done hundreds, maybe thousands, probably thousands of these. And so eventually you can eyeball that. But that's a really good way when you're getting started, is just to take the time to do that little hash mark a 1/4 inch from the edge, and then you'll be able to get it lined up just perfectly. I'm gonna go ahead and give this a press on the wrong side. I'm doing a lot of lifting and pressing here because we have a lot of seams at this point. I don't want to press anything in the wrong direction after we work so hard to get it nice and careful. Just where it should be. Press from the other side, and we have got our completed block. So not bad, really. It is pretty simple. I was able to get this block together fairly quickly. You can definitely get a lot of efficiencies if you chain piece this. And so now I'm going to show you how to sew these together into a row and how to assemble our rows, and you'll have everything you need to make this quilt. It really is not challenging. It just it's a little different if you're used to doing regular half square triangles and things like that. We're working on a little bit different angle, but it has a lot of pizzazz to it, I feel like, with the 60-degree triangles, but they're not that much harder, but they sure look like it. And so you can tell all your friends and make them jealous of your quilting skills and abilities. So check that out, and then maybe share this video with them, and then they'll know the secret too, that they're not that scary. This quilt is assembled in vertical rows, so I'm going to show you now how to pin these together. So the only seam you have to worry about is this one right here. These guys are going to match. So what we're going to do is we're going to lay them right sides together. And what we're going to do is we're going to pin straight in between this seam and this seam to make sure that they match. I'm going to show you a little trick so that way when you're getting the hang of this, you can always have those exactly where they should be, and eventually you'll be able to eyeball this. So what you can do is you can take your ruler and line it up so that the 1/4 inch seam is even with the edge of your block. And then make a little mark that goes across the seam lines there, so that way you know exactly where that 1/4 inch is. Now, I'm going to do the exact same thing on the right side of the other fabric. So just make sure whatever you're using, you've tested and you know that it's going to go away once you're all done. I really like using friction gel pens. I've never had an issue with them coming back. So what we're going to do now, I'm going to just give this a little turn. So I'm going to put my pin in first through the wrong side of this fabric, right on the seam allowance, right where I marked that hash mark. And then I'm also going to put it in the seam allowance where I marked down here. That ensures that these points are right on top of each other, and they are going to look fabulous when they come together. Now, if I were just to rock this and pin it with this one, what I would do is I would move my top fabric forward and my bottom fabric back, and it would no longer be in alignment. So what I do is I grab a second pin, and coming in from the side, just holding the first one straight up and down, put the second one in going across, and then you can remove your pin and you are good to go. So as you're pinning along, go ahead and take that. And again, you can start by making that mark, and eventually you'll be able to eyeball it about a 1/4 inch away. And one other thing to note is sometimes these little dog ears don't line up perfectly. That's okay. Don't worry about that. Worry about getting your seams right on top of each other. Now I'm just going to sew that 1/4 inch seam going all the way down. When I come to that seam, what I do is I sew until I have my needle down in the first half of that seam allowance, and then that kind of acts like a pin, so I can go ahead and pull the pin that I had holding it together. Then I will match my points at the bottom and sew the rest of the way down. Now you always could pin like crazy and pin your points to start with. I typically skip that step and then just align it as I'm sewing. All right, I'm going to keep sewing the rest of my row together, and then it's basically the same process, and we'll show you how to press it open when it's all together. All right, we want to make sure that we press all of our seams open before we sew the rest of our row together. You want to do this every time you sew, and especially with the 60-degree triangles, because they need to be pressed before you can sew it to the next piece. All right, so I'm just pressing this open and lifting and dropping my iron down. That way I don't flip any of those seams going the opposite direction. And this is also a really good opportunity to kind of relay out your pieces in row order to make sure you haven't flipped anything going in the wrong direction. So now we have two what looks like giant diamonds that need to go together. And this is where it can throw you off the first time you are doing the 60-degree triangles, because when we lay these guys right sides together, you can see that we've got pieces going in the opposite direction. That's the way it's supposed to look. You're still going to pin everything the way you did originally, where you're just going to find about a 1/4 inch away and pin straight through those seams, just like so. Then I always grab that second pin. And then you're just gonna line up your points here. And again, this is a great reason to keep those dog ears around, because I can just line up the dog ear from this piece with the point from here, and the point on this side with the dog ear from the piece below it. So it's a great way to keep yourself on track as you're sewing. Then as always, I slow down and stop with my needle down when I hit that seam allowance. Then I'll just align my points at the bottom. And if you need to, this is where the bias can be your friend. Say one of them turned out a little bit bigger than another, you can just give it a little bit of tension and no one will ever know that you eased in a little bit of it. You don't want to give it a huge tug, but a little bit of tension will just help it flatten out and have a beautiful, beautiful join. All right, I'm going to finish sewing my row together, and then I'm going to show you how to put your rows together to join your quilt. All right, so I finished sewing together the row that I've been working on in the video, and I'm laying it next to another row that I've already sewn. And you'll notice that the tops are not even. We're gonna trim those down later, or if you're adventurous and you wanna do bias binding, you can give that a go. But we're gonna show you how to finish it with a nice straight edge. I'm gonna show you how I pin these points together so you can get them to come together just perfectly. And then we're gonna go over how to trim that, and then we are good to go and you are ready to make this quilt. All right, so of course the first step is to flip everything right sides together. Then you can see here, there's 3 seams that come together. What I'm gonna do is put a pin straight through where all 3 of them come together. And then I'm looking for the spot where all 3 seams come together on the other side, right at the tip of that little diamond. So I'm gonna put my pin in there as well. Then, just like before, pinching the top and the bottom of that pin, so it's going straight up and down through those points, so they're right on top of each other. I'm going to take a second pin and pin across that, and that will help hold everything together until I can get it through the sewing machine. And I can pull out that first pin that was going straight up and down. Now again, in this case, it happened where the dog ears lined up right on top of each other, but they might not. So if they don't, no big deal. Don't worry about it. It will line up as long as you have those points together. All right, so you're gonna keep doing that all the way down your row and then just sew it together with your standard 1/4 inch seam. And when you do so, you want to make sure that you are just 1 needle width to the right of where this pin is. So you want to be just to the side of that, and that will ensure that you do not lose any of those points. Once you have the quilt done, you're going to have these jagged edges at the top and the bottom of the quilt. The sides are going to be nice and straight. If you don't like the idea of cutting off all this fabric, you can always create bias binding and go around the edges and just have the points, leave them intact, but I like to just do a straight edge and have a nice regularly sized quilt. So I'm going to show you how to trim it down so you have a nice straight edge for your top and bottom as well. You should have this diamond edge that is about 1/4 inch away from the edge of your fabric. So if you line it up, your ruler up, so that you've got your straight line of your ruler even with that point, then you are going to be able to trim. So that way you will be trimming just 1/4 inch past, and then your 1/4 inch mark should also be meeting right on the tips of the diamonds that are adjoining to it. So I've got everything lined up here. All right, so you can't see it on camera, but I've also got my 1/4 inch marked on my diamond below here, and then also on the top, and my 30-degree line is actually going right along here as well. So that's just another way that you can tell that you've got everything nice and in alignment. So I'm gonna go ahead and give that a trim. And the reason why you want to have this be sitting out there is then when I attach my binding, the point is going to go right to the edge of the binding, and I'm not going to lose that. So that's why it's important to do that. All right, so you're just going to finish cutting across the top, and I'm going to show you how to do the bottom as well, because that is a little different. All right, so for this one, I've got that 1/4 inch lined up right on where that point is, and I've got it at the points at the top and bottom as well, and that will give me my 1/4 inch seam in order to go from there. So that's it. That's all you have to do to have nice even tops and bottoms. Again, that's optional. If you want to do bias binding instead, you certainly can do that, and then just have keep those edges the way they are. But I like to have a nice square edge, and so this is my preferred way of doing it, and that's how you do it. Thanks so much for following along with this week's or this month's Stashin' with Stephanie pattern. I really hope you enjoy this one. I really like it. I think it looks a lot more complicated than it actually is, especially with all these tiny little diamonds in there. It looks like how on earth are you going to put those together? But we did it with 0 Y seams. We had nice straight rows to put together. It was really pretty easy and it went pretty fast. We have this pattern available in multiple sizes, but if you remember with Stashin' with Stephanie, you can make the size I made here today with the bundle that you got plus some background fabric, which we have available over at shop.quiltaddicts.com. And if you want to join Stashin' with Stephanie and start getting all those great deals, plus this pattern and a ton of others for free, you can join over at shop.quiltaddicts.com. Go ahead and click on the links below in order to get direct access to this pattern, Stashin' with Stephanie, the fabric that I use, and we'll have kits for this one as well. So go ahead and check that out over at that link. Thanks so much, and until next week, happy quilting.